For the Record now continues.
This week's election is behind us for the most part, but we all know elections have consequences. They will in Iowa, Illinois, and the federal government. We'll talk about that this morning with Iowa Republican Party Chair Jeff Kaufman and former Scott County Democratic Party Chair Alicia Gehman. Great to see you both as always. Let's get right to it because we typically see the party in power of the White House lose ground in Congress during the midterm election. That history is repeating itself. However, it's not the red Republican tidal wave a lot of people expected. How surprising is this? What do you attribute this to? And what surprised you about the election overall, Jeff?
We had results that we expected in Florida and Ohio, upper New York, and in Iowa. But I assumed that there would be more of a tidal wave. Maybe this is kind of a tidal trickle nationwide. And
that's a new one. Okay.
And obviously, I was hoping that what happened in Iowa would happen across the country. But you're exactly right. There's only a handful of times when the president's party actually gained seats in the midterm. So a lot of this is expected.
Alicia, your surprises here. What do you attribute to the results we've seen on this national scale, too?
Well, obviously, I think the trend on the national versus the state, maybe the national party should have looked to, Representative Kaufman here for a little bit more leadership, because the deepness of that trickle was a little bit deeper here in Iowa than Democrats definitely would have liked to have seen. But definitely, I think, it was on target for what the national, I don't think there was any huge surprises. I think obviously Democrats are very happy with some outcomes in some of the national races. And obviously we lost some really good people here in the state of Iowa. I think probably the biggest shining light in Iowa as far as a Democratic victory was seeing, the Senate president lose his particular seat, but that was also another incumbent running against him. So it was a little bit unique situation in that redistricting being drawn back up together. But it is, we're going to win some and we're going to lose some, and unfortunately it just wasn't a great year for Democrats.
Both Iowa and Illinois saw their governors reelected. Iowa Republicans added to the majorities in both chambers of the state legislature. Illinois Democrats added to their majorities in both chambers in Springfield. What do you think the impact will be on each state? And is Iowa in a position to be a red state for all intents and purposes, like Illinois is a blue state, Alicia?
Well, I'd like to think not. I do think, it's going to be interesting because I think a lot of the areas where we saw some more extreme candidates on the further to the right, I think that's where you're seeing some pushback. And nationally, as you look at the races, it's definitely not the extreme ends that won. It's not the election deniers that were coming out in, huge victories. And I think so that is promising, but I think that just goes to show that the bell curve, the bellwether of the nation, still the majority of voters are still very moderate. And we're maybe not as polarized as we think, and we need to start thinking about that in terms of policies and unification moving forward in future elections.
Jeff, impact on each state. You're not ready to puff out your chest, though, for the victories in Iowa?
I'm not, because as soon as I do that, Alicia will be doing that back to me in 10 years. Because I really believe, yes, we're red right now. But this is not a permanent red. This is not a Kentucky and Tennessee red or an Illinois blue. And I'll tell you, if I thought that, I don't know that I'd make a very good chair, because I believe that Iowa historically has had swing tendencies. I believe that Iowa will always have swing tendencies. And I really think that what the effect that we'll have right now in Illinois with the blue getting bluer, and in Iowa a little bit redder, I think probably you'll see more of the same. I think they'll see that as a mandate from the public. But as far as actual redness or blueness, we're really deep purple, but you're not going to get me to say we're red, at least on a permanent basis.
We'll see. It looks very much like Republicans will control at least the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill by a slim margin, and the Senate will be controlled by a very slim margin, whoever. We're still waiting to see whichever party that is. Divided government can be productive if the parties are willing to compromise, but we've also seen stonewalling and stagnation in recent years. So what direction do you think the federal government is headed for, at least in the next 2 years, Jeff?
Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. There's an example of divided government, two very strong individuals that were very Republican and Democrat in their own respective ways, and they were able to find common ground. I really think there's going to be a decision made in January and February, and I think they're going to decide whether to wait until 24 or actually get something done. There is common ground on issues like immigration and criminal justice reform, and I hope they take it, because you don't have to sacrifice principle to find some common ground at that federal level.
Alicia, which way is the federal government headed over the next 2 years?
Well, it's definitely going to be up in the air, but I definitely think, we've had to, despite the Democrats having control in perception and in you know, the day-to-day, that the filibuster in the Senate has allowed for a supermajority needed to do anything really monumental, let's say.
For either party.
Yeah, and so for either party. And so the fact is, you know, Joe Biden has already been working quite hard and working across the aisle, and I will, you know, bet 100%, you know, $100 to my.
You're gonna put the 401k
we're putting money down. But he's going to continue to do what he's done, and that is reach across aisles and try to build consensus where he can build consensus and move legislation forward. And I don't anticipate we'll see anything different coming from the White House. And as long as that's the White House's direction, I think, and intent and willingness to do, then regardless of what body he has to work with, we're going to see stuff get done. Whether or not it's the stuff we all want or not will be another question.
A lot to watch and always interesting for sure. Jeff Coppin, Alicia Gaiman, thanks for the conversation. Both of you be safe.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That brings us to our question of the week. What do you expect from Congress as well as the state legislatures of Iowa and Illinois after the midterm election results? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com, or you can respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.